Hi. Awesome. It's good to be here. I'm a little bit nervous, and I'm really excited. And it's a bit of a weight on my shoulder to do the last speech. I hope I can do it justice, and it's just been incredible speakers before me. Before I start, I have to make a confession. Josh Levent is not my real name. Okay, I'm going to tell you my real name in a moment. But first, I want to introduce my topic, which is change, how we change. I've been obsessed in the last 10 years in human potential and our capacity for change. And I believe that who we are is determined by the stories that we tell ourselves. What I mean by that is that we have all lived thousands of days in our lives so far. So we have thousands of memories that we could recall, and yet we only recall a handful of them. And the choice of what we remember determines who we are and who we think of ourselves as. Let me give you an example. How many of you were told bedtime stories when you were a little child? Put your hand up. How many of you were told bedtime stories? Okay, that's upwards of 95% of the room. And how many of you remember that on a day-to-day basis? Like yesterday and the day before that, you were thinking about being told bedtime stories as a little kid. Okay, now there's 3 weirdos, including me. And thank you, by the way, for joining me. And the reason for me that I remember it is because I consider myself a storyteller. And so the history and the experiences that I've had with storytelling are important to me, and I remember those experiences. And it's the same for all of you. Whatever you identify yourself as, you will remember experiences in your life that you've had that reflect that identity. So I guess it's time to tell you what my name is. So Josh Levent is the name that I go by. It's the name that I chose, and it's what people call me. But it's not the name that I was born with. The name I was born with is Levent Rüştü Okyay. This is a Turkish name because my father used to be Turkish. Now he's German. My mother used to be German, and now she's a New Zealander, which is where I grew up, in Auckland. And I was living there in 2008 when I decided to go to China for a 2-month volunteering trip. And while I was there, I got a Chinese name. It was a bit of fun, and I wanted to fit in somehow. And I got a Chinese name, which is Li Wen Long. And I went back to New Zealand, and I thought to myself, this is weird. I have a Turkish name, and I have a Chinese name, but I don't have a New Zealand name. So I decided I need a New Zealand name. So I asked my friends to help me, and they did. And we came up with a New Zealand name, which was Joshua Aroha Smith. Yeah. I didn't think much more of it until 2010, when I was doing a workshop with university students, and I decided that I would just try out this new name. I would try telling people that I was Josh and see how that would go. I thought maybe it would be easier for people to call me Josh than Levent. And I immediately ran into 2 problems. The first problem was that I didn't respond to the name Josh. The second problem was that my colleagues did not like the fact that I changed my name. In fact, some of them went around and told all the students that my name wasn't Josh and it was Levent and they should call me that. I was just making things up. And actually, I found that kind of strange, a little bit unsettling. It was the social pressure of staying the same. I think we experience that a lot in our life. Even though everything is always changing, somehow we fight to keep things the same as much as possible. And we do that to ourselves and to each other. And the social pressure makes me quite uncomfortable. Actually, I think it was a teacher that put that into me. If I go back to 2003, I was 14 years old. I was in high school in a health class, and the teacher was telling us about the damaging effects of cholesterol. And I turned my head, as did every other student in the class, to the fat kid in the class. The teacher called out my name and said, "Stay off the class." I stayed by myself, and he asked me, "Do you know why I asked you to stay behind?" And I said, "I have no idea." He said, "You turned and looked at that kid. That was bullying. You were a bully." And my face flushed red, and I had an excuse. It wasn't just me, all the other kids did it too. His brilliant response was, "I just expected better of you." And so, with a little bit of making me feel special and a little bit of making me feel guilty, he forced me to reconsider how I follow conventions and social expectations. So when my friends, my colleagues, were pushing back against my playing around with my name, with my identity, I decided to fight back, and I started using the name Josh everywhere. After a while, I just decided to put it on my signature, and I took out the rest of my name, so all that was left was my two first names, Josh and Levent. And that's how it was born. And these days, sometimes Turkish people come up to me and they say, "Do you know that your last name is a very common first name in Turkey?" Okay, we're coming to the end of my talk. I tell that story because our identity is something we can change. I hope I've shown that, and I hope you ask yourself, who do you want to become? And then, what stories from your past, from your history, stories that you might even have forgotten, can inspire and motivate you to become more of that person? I want you to tell your story. Because if you don't tell your story the way you want, you'll end up living in someone else's story. Thank you.